Hello, my name is Peter Jackson-Main, and I'm going to take this final section of this presentation to talk to you about how herbs can help to protect us in the event of viruses and other microbes as well. And we're going to start with one of the herbs that I actually call a global superstar, Echinacea. You've probably all heard of it. The picture there is on the right-hand side of the screen, otherwise known as purple coneflower. You can get this herb quite easily at health food stores. Some people even grow it. You can use all parts of the herb actually, but probably it's the root that is most has the most sort of supportive properties that we need in the case of immune boosting. And one of the things that Echinacea can do is it can actually help your body to produce more white blood cells when you need them. It's not the kind of herb that we use every day, all day, day in, day out. Well, some people do. I think it's best used personally at time of need. So if you think you might be exposed to something, if you're coming down with something, that would be the time to use Echinacea. Now, just underneath it there, a herb that it's quite often partnered with, astragalus. Now, a little word about astragalus. Again, you can find this herb quite easily in health food stores. Sometimes you'll even find it in the same bottle, a formula as we call it, with Echinacea. It is a specific for the lungs and for building immunity, and it's also an antiviral in its own right. But there is a caution with this herb. You can use it long term to sustain immunity. I have a lot of elderly clients, for example, who use astragalus through the winter months to keep them protected from the flu, particularly. But you shouldn't use it when you've actually got the flu. So if you think you actually have the virus, at that point you should stop using the astragalus. Much less complicated than that, our next herb, thyme. Many of you might even have this in your gardens or be growing it in pots around your home. Obviously it's a culinary herb, we use it a lot for flavouring, but it's also fantastic as an antimicrobial herb. Now when we talk about antimicrobial herbs, we are covering the gamut of bacteria, viruses, fungi and other things besides. So in other words, thyme is kind of universally effective at helping us to manage our terrain by keeping it microbe free. The wrong kind of microbes, that is. As Bobby said, there are some microbes that we want to encourage, those in the gut, for example. Now, thyme is also a good expectorant, as we say, and what that means is it helps if you have a cough, it helps that cough to be productive. There's nothing worse than a hot, dry cough, which is one of the symptoms of coronavirus. And what thyme does, along with other herbs that we're going to be mentioning soon, is to help that the mucosa of your lungs to expel material that it perhaps ought not to be carrying. Next up is elderberry or elderflower, or the elder generally. Obviously the berry comes out in the autumn, the flower is available in the sort of mid to late spring, and right now as I talk, mid-March, we're looking at the leaves coming out. Actually, all parts of this plant can be used. We mentioned the elderberry, people make elderberry syrup. We're having difficulty getting that at the moment because there's so many people out there buying it, but if you do get hold of some, grab it with both hands and start using it. Elderflower, as you probably know, makes a very, very pleasant tea, and they make wine out of it as well. We're not encouraging that because, of course, of the alcohol content, as we mentioned earlier. But elderflower, again, is antiviral. Elderberry is antiviral, but it turns out that the strongest antiviral component of elder is actually the leaf. You do have to boil it. So if you know how to make a herbal decoction, which is where you actually put the herbs in a pan, you put the water in, you put it on a heat, on a gentle heat, bring it to the boil and just boil it away for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And at that point you can strain off the leaves and use the liquid. You need about a cup twice or 3 times a day of that. Yarrow is our next, prepared in very much the same way, actually. And again, it's an antiviral herb, an immune supportive herb. And one of the ways in which yarrow works for us is that it helps to make us sweat. Now you may think, why do I want something that helps to make me sweat when I've got a fever anyway? Well, the point of that is actually to bring it to the point where your pores open and the sweat starts pouring. That will actually cool you down, but also it will, as the Chinese say, release the exterior. So it helps the body to discharge toxins through the skin. Now yarrow is particularly useful in the early stages of a viral infection. So when you actually have the fever, when you're feeling a little bit hot, your forehead maybe is a little bit hot, you might be running a bit of a temperature, that's the time to use yarrow. Our next herb is ginger. We all know it. We probably associate it more as a culinary spice. We add it to stews and soups and curries, etc., to help flavour it. It has a spicy, warm flavour. And in the context of viral illness, this is quite important. Spicy, warm, pungent flavours tend to help to break up mucus, for example. And as we've probably heard already, one of the features of the virus when it actually hits the lungs is that it starts to produce this very thick, sticky mucus, which is, as Bobby said, a breeding ground, if you like, for all sorts of microbes, but viruses including. And ginger also works to break up those mucus deposits, and this is why it's such a useful herb for use when we have that kind of respiratory tract issue. Very, very simple ginger tea recipe here. Cut a thumb-sized section of fresh ginger root, grate it, pour hot water over it, add freshly squeezed lemon juice, and there you go. It's as simple as that. You probably have to let it steep for maybe 5 minutes or so. It's a really refreshing and healthful and protective drink, very easily made. Now, if you think you've been exposed to the virus and you are starting to develop symptoms, at that point, the first thing, of course, you need to do is to inform your local health authority, who will give you the relevant advice, and, of course, self-isolate. But it's at this stage, at the onset of symptoms, that you could also start using herbal tea. And my absolute favourite here is the one that we've got on the screen at the moment: yarrow, elderflower, peppermint with a little bit of fresh grated ginger. Now, we've met yarrow already, we've met elderflower already. Peppermint, very easy to obtain. You could even go out and buy peppermint tea bags, actually. Tear the tea bag open, empty the herbs out, combine them with the yarrow and the elderflower. Equal parts will do fine. Place a couple of tablespoons full of the dried herbs for every 2 litres of water. So you need quite a big teapot or a big jug to make this in. Literally, you just put the herbs into the jug, pour the hot water over, and let it steep for something like 10 minutes. You can then add your fresh grated ginger, just like we did in the last slide. Make a large pot, and the trick is to just keep drinking it. It will make you sweat, you cool down, you heat up again maybe if you've got a fever, then you drink some more. So you just literally keep drinking it. When you finish that pot, make another one. It's as simple as that. And you can actually spend the whole day. Now, what you're doing when you're doing that, of course, is resting. I actually think it's quite a nice thing to do. Find a good film, something to entertain you, a book or something like that, but just lie down on your sofa, make a nice pot of tea, keep drinking it. Don't eat too much when you're doing this. You can eat lightly after a few hours if you want, but it's best just to let the herbs do their job. So on the next slide, we're going to have a look at the fire cider, which is something else that you can bring in at this stage. But before we do that, I want to go through a few hydrotherapy routines. Hydrotherapy simply means therapy with water. And the first of these is the hot and cold shower. It's easy to do. You have a shower in your home. Most of us do. You don't have to go super hot and super cold, but warm and cool will do. But it's the alternation between hot and cold that's going to move your circulation, move your lymph, and again, enable your immune system to work better. Now, the way that we do this is we go something like 20 to 30 seconds with warm, and then we go 20 to 30 seconds with cool or cold, and we alternate that maybe 5 or 6 times. So in all, it takes about 3 or 4 minutes to do. Not a very big investment of time. One of the advantages of this is that, as I say, it moves circulation. If you can think about it this way, if you put hot water on the skin, it'll go red, the blood will come to the surface. If you put cold water on the skin, the peripheral circulation will close down, the skin will go pale, and you can then imagine that the blood is actually moving deeper into the tissue. So what it does is it moves blood backwards and forwards between the surface and the deeper layers. If you do that on a whole body basis, it's a really effective circulatory therapy, and one that, as I say, makes sure that your immune capacity is moving around your body in the way that you want it to. The next one is Epsom salts or salts baths. Epsom salts is my favourite because it is actually magnesium sulfate. And you may know that magnesium is a mineral that we use very much for the purposes of relaxing, helping us sleep, helping us to unwind, release tension, etc. So you can get it as a supplement, and actually it's not a bad idea to get some magnesium if you are feeling a little bit tense and wound up over this whole issue. But having a relaxing bath is also a really good way of unwinding, and it does allow your body to absorb some of the magnesium from the water and also to excrete the waste products through the skin again. Magnesium will almost, again, it will open up the pores and it will almost pull the toxins out through your skin. Just a cup of magnesium salts in a bath is enough, and you can get magnesium salts in most supermarkets these days for the purposes of bathing. The next one is dry skin brushing. For this you need a special kind of brush. It's a stiff bristle brush, not too stiff because it'll be a little bit harsh on the skin. You can buy them online, you can buy them in stores. They're quite easy to find. And I like the ones with the big handle. They're like a loofah, if you like. They have a big handle so that you can get to difficult to reach areas around the back, for example. Now the idea behind skin brushing, again, is to improve circulation and stimulate the lymphatic cells, the lymphatic system where the immune cells are located. Now we start from the feet, it says here, but I would start from the extremities inwards. So you can go hands up the arms, around into the chest like that, from the feet up to the legs again, getting to those difficult to reach areas around the back with your long-handed brush, and then ending with circular motions around the abdomen in a clockwise motion. Now what this does is it works in the direction of the peristaltic flow of the bowel. We're going to be mentioning the bowel in a future slide and why it's particularly important to keep your bowels active, but this can also help to keep your digestive system going, moving correctly as well. Another thing you can do, which comes into the hydrotherapy category, is chest compresses. Now for this you need something a little bit pungent. I suggest onion. This is an old recipe that actually literally my grandmother did teach it to me. And what you do is you get a few onions, you chop them up, you boil them a little. You don't want to sort of cook them up too much, but because they'll lose their potency. But you just bring them to a boil maybe and then allow them to sit and soak in the water. You can then soak a cloth in that, apply it to the chest, and the pungency of the onions will help your chest to break up those mucus deposits that we talked about before. You could also use ointments in the same way. I don't know whether you've ever heard of tiger balm. It's a kind of pepperminty, camphor, eucalyptus, that kind of thing. Usually given for, as smelling salts, if you like, for sort of opening up the upper respiratory passages, but also really, really good rubbed onto the chest to help with congestion on the chest. So here, as promised, is our fire cider. Now, I was taught this traditional remedy for respiratory tract complaints as the plague tonic, so it seems somehow appropriate in the current circumstance. It's to say it's warming is an understatement. It is hot, spicy, and it cuts through the mucus. This is what I really like about it, particularly in that stage of getting a cold, for example, or a respiratory tract infection when you're producing a lot of phlegm, it's stuck in the back of your throat, you don't seem to be able to move it or cough it up or anything. This is a fantastic remedy for helping out with those kinds of situations. You need 5 herb or spice ingredients, and you need organic, fresh pressed apple cider vinegar. Equal parts by weight of garlic, ginger, chilies, the hottest you can get, onion, and horseradish. Horseradish, by the way, is also extremely pungent. If you've ever had horseradish, I understand, I'm a vegetarian myself, but I understand that it's a partner to roast beef. And one of the reasons we choose spices to go with certain foods is because one of the things they do is they get your digestion going. They stimulate better digestion, and that's almost like a side effect of this particular recipe as well. So it has many, many health benefits for us. So we chop these spices up. Be a little bit careful when you're chopping them up. You know that onions can make you cry. Well, some of these other ingredients will also have pretty strong effects as they start to release their properties into the atmosphere. So maybe even wear a mask, particularly with horseradish actually. It can be quite heady stuff. So when you chop them all up, pop them into a jar. Now choose the size of jar, obviously, according to how much you're making. You can make a big batch of this up all at once, or you can just make small quantities according to need. I would recommend anybody, any household with an interest in maintaining health naturally should make fire cider once a year in a massive batch, keep you going the whole year, and have some for your friends and relatives as well. So put it in the jar, top it up with your apple cider vinegar, and then basically seal it. You can get a Kilner jar or something like that with a sealable lid. Shake it up once or twice every day. Strain it out after 2 weeks. So the pulp gets strained out. What's left is your fire cider. The dose, simply, if you are suffering something, 1 teaspoon twice daily, and you can put it in water if you prefer. It is very strong. It will blow your head off the first time you try it, but you'll get used to it and you will really appreciate its properties. It warms the whole body up from the inside. So if we are experiencing the effects of a virus which has gone inside us and it's making us cold and sticky, then having something warm that's going to break up that mucus is absolutely the best thing. Now the danger period is when the infection goes deeper into the lungs. It's now gained access to where it wants to go. Remember that Bobby told you that it was targeting the lungs, this particular virus. So it's got there and it's started to do what it does. This is the point at which we need really to be breaking up that congestion. So here's a few ideas additional to that. We talked about the fire cider in the last slide. That can definitely help, but there are a few other things as well. Particularly if perhaps you're a little bit sensitive to pungent things. Now what I've got here is a sprig of thyme. You probably want a little bit more than this, but you need to break it down a bit. This is fresh thyme, and the leaves are, as you see, the sort of green tips there. They're quite fresh. In order to release the oils from these leaves, you're going to have to break those leaves down a little bit. So the way we do this is simply by rubbing them between the palms of our hands before we then put them into the teapot or into the cup where we're going to be making the tea. And just have a quick smell after you've done that. And actually, when I first got this, when I first picked up this sprig, I put it to my nose and I could not really smell anything at all. After I've rubbed it, the smell is really quite strong, and it's the volatile oils in the thyme that have antiseptic properties, antiviral properties, and also, as we said, help to break up that mucus and allow the lungs to expel it. So you put your sprig into a cup, pour boiling water over it, let it steep for about 5 or 10 minutes and then drink it. And you can have 2 or 3 cups of this every day as well. You can do pretty much the same thing with the yarrow. We talked about the yarrow. Again, if you know how to recognize this herb, please make sure that you do. Work with somebody who knows the herb itself, or if you know, that's absolutely fine. Look it up in a book maybe, but be careful when you're picking herbs wild. Yarrow is very, very abundant in our countryside around here. I'm talking from the UK at the moment, and it's about to come into season as well. You need a large bunch of this. Put it into a pot and cover it up with water. You can use freshly boiled water if you want. You want to bring it to a boil, very gently simmer it away for 5 minutes or so, and then you can strain out the herbs and use the liquid. With yarrow, you're looking to have maybe a cup of this 3 times a day. Other teas that can help, spicy cinnamon blends. Some herbal teas that you can buy in the stores will have cinnamon in. I'm thinking about the spicy blends, the digestive blends, the yogi teas as they call them. Very often will have some cinnamon in. Licorice is another herb that we use. Don't go out and buy licorice all sorts. They have too much sugar in them and they won't do you much good medicinally. But if you can get cinnamon quills, then you can actually break these up and put them into teas as well, pour boiling water over them, or even just mix them with your thyme or your yarrow or whatever else you're preparing. Mullein is another herb that we quite often use in this context. Again, it's a herb that helps to bring up phlegm so that the body can expel it. Mullein is often known as Aaron's rod. I'm talking about it because many of you might actually have this plant in your garden. It's a very popular garden plant as well as a wild plant. And it's either the flowers or the leaves, the young leaves of mullein that we would be using. And again, the same thing applies. You're just picking the amount that you want, rubbing it gently to break down the leaf material or the plant material, and then pouring your boiling water over the top of that. And also, of course, at this stage, you're going to be following the guidance that we covered earlier with Rian on nutrition. For my money, once you get to this stage in a viral attack, it's best as far as possible to go liquids only. Now, there's a lot said these days about what we know in terms of stress undermining our health in all sorts of ways, and we know a fair amount about this now. It's fairly well recognised medically that stress is a killer and that it undermines our immune system in particular. And one of the reasons for this is because when we're under stress, we release a lot of a particular hormone called cortisol, which literally suppresses very important sections of our immune system. So managing stress becomes really important when we're wanting to fight infections and stay healthy. Eating the nutritious foods we've covered, but particularly increasing the intake of magnesium-rich foods. We could talk about spinach, almonds, avocado, black beans. All of these foods have higher than average quantities of magnesium, and we're going to talk about some herbs that do in a minute as well. Magnesium, as we said in the last slide, has this relaxing effect on the body, helps you to chill out, helps you to feel a little bit better about things, and of course helps you to sleep better as well. We said already about the Epsom salts bath, which of course is, Epsom salts is magnesium salt specifically. Exercise, don't go over the top with this one, especially if you're not feeling too good, but do get active. Make sure that you do a little bit of exercise every day. They're recommending something like 30 minutes every day or 5 days a week or something like that. It's perfectly adequate. Different types of exercise, some cardio, some relaxing, some aerobic, non-aerobic. It doesn't really matter. I think where exercise is concerned, we're all busy people. It's best to do what you enjoy. But remember that your circulation, particularly your lymphatic circulation, will move better if you move. And abdominal breathing exercises can also help. Abdominal breathing exercises, if you're breathing really deeply into your abdomen and then pushing the diaphragm up when you breathe out, there's an anatomical feature called the thoracic duct, which goes through your diaphragm, and it's the main lymphatic vessel in your body. And what happens when you deep breathe is your diaphragm moves up and down, massaging this duct, this thoracic duct, and enabling your lymph system to move around the body more effectively. And all exercise will do that to some extent. We also could mention rebounding in terms of exercise. You know, the little mini trampolines, the one-person trampolines, great fun to do, put some music on, bounce around for a bit. But any kind of exercise will help to move circulation and move lymph in particular. We were just talking about magnesium, which of course is one way that we could help to promote good sleep. But it's important to realise that sleep is one of the ways in which we can look after our immune system. A lot of immune functions specifically take place at night when the body is at rest, and the immune system can get to work on fighting viruses and bacteria and anything else that we want it to, basically. Specific immunity, that part of our immunity which learns by meeting pathogens, viruses, etc., and educating themselves about these things, will activate specifically at night. One of the things that happens at night, we mentioned cortisol in the last slide. Your cortisol level drops in the evening so that you can sleep. If you have too much cortisol in your body, you won't sleep well. And when you wake up, hopefully there's enough cortisol suddenly released in order to get you to start your day and be effective. But overnight you don't want it, and that's one of the reasons why good sleep helps in maintaining a good immune system. So one of the things it does is it increases levels of white blood cells, particularly the natural killer cells or NK cells, which defend the body against infection. And it regenerates our body in all sorts of other ways as well. How much sleep is enough? It obviously varies from individual to individual. I reckon we're talking about 7 to 9 hours of good quality sleep for optimizing your immune system. And we're going to be talking about a few other ideas, particularly herbal ideas, that might help you with this in the next slide. The last thing you want to be doing when you want to sleep well is to be stimulating your nervous system. So please try and avoid coffee, particularly. Any other stimulants, caffeinated teas are included in that, Coca-Cola, anything with caffeine in it, or other stimulating products, energy drinks, for example. Alcohol will also upset your sleep. Alcohol in the first stages of ingestion tends to be, it is a relaxant, but it can also be a stimulant in the sense that it sort of gets you going. After a while, of course, it will lead to a sort of torpor, if you like, a sort of drugged state. And that's not good for sleep. You may think it's good for sleep, but actually you won't sleep. You won't have good quality sleep if you're drinking alcohol just before you go to bed. Herbal teas are particularly good, and the ones that I've highlighted for you here are passion flower, a traditional sleep remedy and a really, really effective one. Valerian, often used, need to be a little bit careful about that, can vary from person to person. I personally find valerian keeps me awake, but plenty of people find that it gives them a comfortable, relaxed sleep. Chamomile is always a good bet, and by the way, very good for children as well. The one I would probably highlight out of all those three would be passion flower. There's a lot of clinical evidence to show that passion flower is effective for promoting sleep. I find it does a very good job, especially if you actually find it difficult to get off to sleep. Have a passion flower tea, or if you can get it, tincture of passion flower. You want to take about a 5 ml dose of the tincture or 1 cup of the tea just before you go to sleep. That should ease you into a nice, relaxed, comfortable sleep. Now, one hormone we do want in our systems at night is melatonin. It's the sleep hormone. So one of the things we could do is to eat cherries, which contain melatonin. There are a few herbs that also contain melatonin. I'm not going to go through them here because they're specialist use, really, but consulting a herbalist might be a good thing to do if you really want to follow through with herbal treatments for this or anything else. Obviously, put your mobile phone away, switch your TV off, put your iPad away. This will also tend to lower melatonin levels. One of the things that lowers melatonin levels naturally is when you wake up in the morning and it's light. So the light, in fact, is what lowers the melatonin levels. So the same thing, light coming from a screen is going to do the same thing to you. Some screens I know these days have a kind of blue limiting thing that they filter. I think I noticed my mobile phone at a certain point in the evening will actually turn slightly red. I always notice that. That's probably the moment that you should turn it off. So screens, electromagnetic radiation, probably best avoided. I don't like to have electrical equipment in my bedroom. I don't like to sleep near power sockets or anything like that if you can possibly avoid it. Try to make sure that your sleeping environment is as free from those influences as possible. If the room where you're sleeping is not completely blacked out, if you like, or if you don't get good quality darkness in your room, then you could wear an eye mask. And again, this will ensure sufficient release of melatonin and help you to sleep in a regular rhythm or pattern. Another thing that really helps with sleep is not to eat too late. If your digestive system is busy digesting food, it will be keeping you awake to some extent, even if you are not aware of it. And sometimes actually our digestive system can wake us up during the middle of the night as well. So my rule on that is try not to eat after 6 p.m. So we've already talked a little bit about exercise, and what we're looking for here is not too much, not too intense, not too repetitive. That can actually put stress on the immune system, but low and moderate intensity exercise to boost immune activity, get that circulation going and provide better resistance. Good examples of this might be walking, probably one of the best actually, jogging, but again not pushing it too much, cycling in the fresh air. Oxygen, of course, is a really important nutrient generally, but also supports immune functions. low to mid intensity weight training. You don't want to be pumping iron or anything like that, but free weights done on a fairly moderate scale would be also good. And then of course we've got the anaerobic types of exercise, yoga, Pilates, stretching, Tai Chi we might mention as well. All of these will help your body to maintain its resistance, its suppleness, and its general tone and condition. Now, a very wise and famous man once said, "Let thy food be thy medicine, and thy medicine be thy food." That was Hippocrates, the father of medicine, as we call him. And here's a recipe for an immune-boosting soup, which is not only effective, but also delicious as well. So the ingredients are on the slide here: a kilo of carrots and or sweet potatoes. And if you're not European, by the way, a kilo is about 2 pounds. So carrots, sweet potatoes, these are root vegetables, and one of the advantages of root vegetables is they sustain us. They sustain energy levels. They have complex sugars and carbohydrates in their makeup, which help to build immunity. In fact, many herbs that we use for immunity also have similar plant constituents. So we want to peel those, chop them finely, get them ready, and then we want 2 cloves of garlic, just 2 little cloves, and crush them, peel them. You must crush them. That's how the medicinal advantages of garlic get released. So it won't do much good to just pop a whole clove in. You just need to bruise it, crush it, just very slightly, and then you can use it. A splash of olive oil or a tablespoon of coconut oil, as you prefer. Your choice of oil is up to you. I like either. A really good quality, fresh pressed organic olive oil is my personal favourite. Then Brazil nuts, 50 grams of organic Brazil nuts, or you can use Brazil nut butter, a couple of tablespoons full of that. 750 ml to a litre of vegetable stock. Now, you can make this yourself through vegetable offcuts. That's the long way round. Of course, you can also buy vegetable stock in the shops as well. A thumb of fresh ginger, just like we had in one of our teas before. The same amount of fresh turmeric. Turmeric is actually very similar to ginger. It looks pretty similar. It's a bit more orange, comes from the same family. It's a very similar plant, has similar properties, and of course is a great flavouring agent and also colouring agent as well. But you can also use a teaspoon of turmeric powder if you want as well. A handful of fresh mint leaves goes down well. Remember, we've already come across peppermint and its virtues in terms of helping the immune system. A lime. You can do this either way. If you're going to blend the soup anyway, so you can put the whole lime in, just chop it up into rough portions and pop it in, or you can actually just squeeze the juice out if you want as well. One thing about the lime, if you put the whole thing in, the peel and everything, is that you get a lot of immune enhancing and antiseptic essential oils in that portion of the fruit as well. Don't forget your cayenne or your chili powder, a pinch of chili powder to give it that spicy, warming quality, and then sea salt and freshly ground pepper to taste. So what we're going to do with our carrots and or sweet potatoes is we're going to actually roast them in the first place. So we get a roasting tin, pop it in a preheated oven, 220 degrees Celsius will do. Once it's preheated, then we can add the carrots and or sweet potatoes and the garlic and your oil to that mix. Toss it around a bit, add your seasoning, your salt and pepper, and then pop it in to cook. You need to keep an eye on this. You need to cook it until the carrots or the sweet potatoes have started to colour up, and they need to be tender. You can maybe just take them out from time to time and check how they're going. Try just pushing a spoon down onto them and seeing if they crush nice and easily. Once they're there, we warm up the stock, and then we put the carrot sweet potato mix into a blender and add the stock splash by splash whilst blending it or whizzing it at the same time until you've added all the stock. What you're aiming for is a thick, smooth, creamy mash. And at this point you can put your cayenne in, a little pinch of cayenne pepper, and just to offset the heat of that, a handful of fresh mint, and then whiz that round again a little bit. Trickle and whiz in enough stock to get the soup as thin or as thick as you like, season to taste, and finish with a slice of lime or lemon juice is a really nice finishing touch. And you can have that as a warming snack or meal anytime. Now remember that I said that if you actually have the virus or you are feeling ill, it's best not to eat too much, but warming soups and broths are absolutely perfect, and this one I promise you, you will love.